What's up, folks? I'm Odd, by the way. Today we're going to be, if you did notice by my sketches, our topic is going to be on that of dogs. Specifically, more so, cartoon dogs. So, this episode is going to be a little bit self-indulgent, but I guess when isn't my art self-indulgent? Regardless, I'm going to be making some fan art, which I don't usually do. But today I'm going to be talking along the topic of some cartoon dogs that kind of, inspired me as an adult. And with that being said, let's kind of get right into the speed paints. I'm going to be starting out with Balto. Now, this is based, obviously, if you haven't seen the movie or heard of any of the stories, it's very, very loosely based off of a real story. So it was, I think it was a 90s film or an 80s film. I think the way that I found it was because I was already pretty obsessed with dogs when I was a kid. And I think I put it on because I was looking for something kind of like a cartoon, obviously, to watch while I was sick. Like, I'm talking like deadly ill as a small child for like 3 days in a row. I don't even remember sleeping during this period of time. Like, maybe I slept during the day, but I was up all night, being sick, like throwing up, barely ate anything, for a good period of time, which was probably a little dangerous, but I made my way through it. And I guess ironically so, I was watching a movie about the group of sled dogs that inspired the Iditarod, which is that story involves running, what was it, steroids or vaccines or something like that, to this small town in Nome, Alaska. And these dogs, were made basically for this, but it was still an insane run. And even though there are obviously other heroes to the story, like I think the lead dog, as his name was Koga, was more responsible for this type of like the most of the run. Balto led the end of the run, but regardless, the animated movie is very much not like that. And you can see in my references that I've actually pulled up a picture of what was the original Balto. And the funny thing is that after I watched the movie and kind of grew into this minor obsession of it, I didn't like I realized that it was based off of a true story, so I picked up a book about like detailing the adventure and stuff like that, and the kind of, I think it was shared over telegraph, and that's why it was so popular too. So those telegraphs were recorded. They obviously got kind of put into this kind of book documenting what things went down there, right? On the front cover of that book, they use another grayish Siberian Husky looking dog, which is also not what Balto looks like. You can see what Balto looks like in my references here. It's kind of childhood killing. He's a brownish black dog, but it's okay because he's got little socks. He got little boots on. But he's actually a very sweet, very fluffy boy. And one of the ideas that I came up with was to have, in this style, which obviously I wasn't the greatest at replicating, have Balto kind of looking at himself as he kind of truly is. I guess in the movie itself, he was kind of more of a brownish color than a gray color. But it was definitely, I think, just supposed to be kind of a more colorized gray. Like, you make a gray character, they're not going to be very appealing. You're supposed to look kind of like tawny and mucky and stuff like that. But yeah, the ironic thing is that like the whole thing is like the movie showing all of these purebred, gorgeous, husky looking sled dogs, and they do not look like that. They probably look more like Balto if they have that kind of wolfish coloring at all. But for the most, or let me rephrase that. They probably look more like Balto does in the movie, and probably look more like Balto does in real life, because they're mutts. That was something that interested me. Obviously, like I said, this sparked a whole minor obsession of mine during my childhood, obviously, after I watched it like 800 times, and more after that one period of time that I was sick. I started really looking into sled dogs and stuff like that. Realized it probably wasn't as much of a charmed life. Obviously, like the reality of the actual story itself, and kind of, cut away some of the mysticism. And then just hearing that kind of sled runners in Alaska, it's not a pretty job, especially if you're sitting there breeding the dogs. They're like half feral. They are working mongrels essentially. So they are basically still like a breed in development because they have to be they're still being bred to create this perfect running dog and just something that likes the snow and likes to run. And they don't actually like Siberian Huskies, like purebreds, at all because they're not bred to run anymore. They're just kind of bred to live in the snow. So I thought that was interesting. I wound up drawing Balto interacting with Balto, but you know, the way Balto looks in real life and sort of looking at himself like, and who are you? I think that it turned out really cute, so I'm happy with it. All right, next up, we are in a completely different era, but with a very similar name for our main character. I decided I was going to draw Bolt. Now, ironically enough, I did actually do this a couple of years ago, and now I thought that it had to have been no more than 2 years ago. Lately, everything that I was like, I made this relatively recently has actually been something that I made in like 2019. Uh, but in this particular case, the thing that I made that I was like, oh, I probably did make this back in like 2019, or watch it be something that I made way too short of a period of time ago and it just looks awful. And no, no, thankfully, I guess, but it was made in 2018. So, like, 3 years ago at this point, and I'm like, what is time? I was so confused as to where it was, too, because I was like, I can't have made it that long ago. Apparently, I did. Bolt was one of those things that I watched a lot when I was a kid. Obviously, it was within my generation. Like, this was actually a kids' movie that I was supposed to see as a kid, and I did. And I had the DVD version of it, I think, and I was obviously for most movies the type of kid, especially the movies that I was obsessed with, and this was definitely one of them, that I would go into those extra features that they would have on the film and just watch them over and over and over and over again. And honestly, it was a lot of fun. But it was something that I think really inspired me into, I think, looking into animation and design and stuff like that again, because there's so many aspects of it. And I was like, there's got to be one thing in this that I can do. And it's still a dream of mine. Like, it's still probably a little further off, but honestly, yeah, this is something that drove, I think, me in my later years. This, like, it's also kind of reawoke my feeling toward like animated movies as a tween. You know, I kind of fell out of it for a little while, and then when I got back into it, I was like, oh no, 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 this is part of who I am. And so now I draw cartoon dogs all the time. So yes, for this concept, I decided to obviously just do a couple of busts, a couple of poses. His head is very interesting. He's got kind of a what was that, the like early 2000s The Dog pop art line? Remember that, where they were in like the fisheye lens, and like they they had the big noses, and then they would make plushies that just looked like that in at all angles. He kind of looks like that. Not to knock on him, he's an adorable dog and a good boy, and this movie is still so pretty. I was looking at screenshots of it the entire time. But for the like kind of fan art area that I had apparently dedicated to the bottom of these speed paints and probably made them way bigger projects than they needed to be, I had post movie Bolt interacting with, and spoilers, but the dog that they get to replace him at the end of the film, and and like being kind of wary of the idea that maybe they the show sort of like redid the thing that they did with him, and he's worried that this dog doesn't know that they're not in reality right now. And they're like, oh, I'm an actor. My name is Sprinkles. Like, a totally different personality than what he expects, right? And yeah, like this thinking about the aspect of the show, the fact that they traumatized this poor dog for the sake of this tween drama CW show, and like you look at this as an adult and tell me that it is not a CW show. It totally, totally is. This is just a soap opera. Like, I don't even think that it has to be that high of a hyperbole toward a show that would totally exist on daytime television now. And honestly, I would probably watch it. I would totally watch the superpowered dog show. Just telling you, Disney Plus, if you wanted to make the show that Balt is in Balt, I'd probably watch it. And then have some little segments where they're like actors in the background. I think that that would be kind of fun. Let me design characters for it, please, too. Um, but but yeah, and like the character interactions in this are all so sweet, and like the the sense of dogginess in Bolt. I know that sounds weird. He's a good dog, and I mean that in the terms of they made a good like representation of a dog. When he's acting like a dog, I've had dogs and still continue really to have dogs with stress issues, and he's got all of that body language, he kind of like his pacing, his sense of like insecurity, you can just feel it, and it's so like real. It's so weird because he's humanized obviously in the movie itself, but he's got so much like dog character to him that is so realistic, and it breaks your heart because you're just sitting there like, oh, this dog doesn't understand, and it's like in real life he still wouldn't, you know. And so I think that that's why this is such a good story. The only thing that I don't understand is like why they decided that it was not good for Penny to continue to look for what seems to be her dog in this film, but that's just conflict, I guess. But realistically, like, what does it matter to other people's jobs if this girl, continues to act with the actor dog and then looks for her dog? It just makes me a little mad. But regardless, um, I don't care about your CW show. Give me my dog. I'm gonna look for my goddamn dog, and you're not gonna stop me. So that's my only complaint there. But yes, Bolt. I like this one too, obviously. All right. Last but likely oldest of our bunch here, actually it is the oldest of our bunch here, is going to be a classic Don Bluth film. We got All Dogs Go to Heaven. Now specifically I'm drawing Charlie, the main character from the story. And I will say that I did not necessarily grow up with this movie, the movie in my references, the first film. Like, I did, and I think I watched it a couple of times when I was a bit younger. But along with, being the kid that obsessed over, dog movies and animal movies, and watched all of the special features on my DVDs. I think before that, really, even, and as I was growing up, I was a sequel kid. I don't know if it was necessarily because they were cheaper, because my older brother wore out all of the all of the VHSs or something like that, or because they came out at a time where I was in their age demographic, and like I liked them more because they were easier for baby me to understand. Like, I could probably go on a days long rant about the hidden and lost potential of The Lion King 2. Like, don't test me about it. It's there. It's ready. I did watch the sequel to this, I think first. It was this and The Secret of Nim, I think, that I watched. And it might have also been during my sickness era, or just any period of time, I guess during the weekends that I was, stuck at my grandparents' house, that I would go on and basically look for, if I was alone, I would look for anything that was animal-based, cartoon-based, pick what I liked, and half the time, if it were on demand or something like that, like through cable, it would be a sequel. So I'd watch those and I would, fall in love with those and the animation and stuff like that in them. But yeah, so I watched the sequel, the second one to this. I don't think I've watched any of the processive sequels or the series. I didn't get that far into it, but I did watch this sequel, with the one with the kid with the hat, and I wound up drawing a bust of Charlie in that collar because I was so used to that silhouette of his. One thing that I did do for the original film that I was the kind of the fan art portion of this particular picture. I before had my other two characters interacting with some version of themselves, but in this case, I did actually get a character interaction because one of the other characters was a dog, and that is they just call her the Whippet, the pink Whippet angel in the first one. I think she inherits the name Annabelle in later iterations. But yeah, she's saying something along the lines of like after Charlie finds his way back, into heaven, she's like, after all these years, you really think that was a mistake? Because the first film, and this is going to be my minor theory for the episode, okay? The first film feels like Charlie's been new, okay? It feels like that he's actually been duped into thinking he duped Annabelle. At least at the beginning of the story, right? It's like, because the concept of the story, I guess minor spoilers for an ancient film, is that Charlie dies. He goes to heaven and he meets this pink Whippet angel Annabelle, and she says, "Oh, all dogs go to heaven because all dogs are inherently good." And Charlie's like, "I don't buy it, but okay," because he's been through some shady stuff, and like, so they kind of have their exchanges and stuff like that, and he takes his watch that is his his soul, whatever, back, unwinds it, or winds it back up again, and falls back down to earth as a living zombie. Everybody's terrified. No, he goes through some stuff and he winds up, proving his worth. Now the thing is that like he's told that he can't come back to heaven once he's done this. And I have this theory that Annabelle knew that Charlie wasn't feeling it, not necessarily that he was a bad guy, because if you look at the beginning of the show, he's at least, or the beginning of the movie, he's at least like a force of good, not necessarily great, obviously, but like he's a decent in the shady underbelly that he lives in, right? He helps those kind of less fortunate to him, and but I still don't think that he believes that he's good, right? And so Annabelle sees the fact that Charlie doesn't necessarily want to die just yet, and the opportunity to help out the main human character, Anne-Marie, who's suffering at the hands of his partner, let him get his vengeance and let him kind of, move on, basically. And I think that she did that. She set that up. Like, why? They're interacting through this one whole scene, and like, she's like, "What are you doing? Oh, don't unwind that watch. What are you?" And it's very like, "Wait, no, stop, come back." You're telling me there hasn't been one other dog that hasn't accepted their death and has tried to do that? Like, she made that whole thing up and basically gave him a miracle so that she could snub Carface. Like, there's no way. And then later he saves the universe a couple of times, which is great. Like, it goes from the beginning, the first movie is just this dog redeeming himself. Oh yeah, but the second movie, he's saving the world from the apocalypse. Okay, he's saving the world from Satan opening up the gates of heaven. I think that I'm going to leave this here, and I'm curious as to see what you guys think about these movies in particular. Or what movies, particularly with animals in them, that you watched a lot as a kid that you feel kind of influenced you. I definitely have a longer list than this, but once I hit like 2, I realized that I was accidentally undertaking a project. Like, I did not want to wait this long between videos, and suddenly I'm doing 3 art pieces and 3 speed paints for an essay video on my young life. So, it's a bit of an effort. So I'm curious to see what you guys think about it. I'm probably going to be doing more regardless, but It's nice to have friends. So, if you like this, just, let me know. And at that, I will see y'all next time.